we're working now. So, shall we make a start, everybody, and welcome to the July meeting of the West Yorkshire Combined Authority Employment and Skills Committee. I'll just welcome, we've got two new council representatives joining us today. Councillor Eleanor Thompson from Leeds City Council and Councillor Joe Hepworth from Wakefield Council, and welcome to the Employment and Skills Committee today. Just to remind people that this meeting is being filmed and broadcast for the, I'm sure, the vast audience out there. So please, can I just remind people to use your microphones when you're speaking, please, and we ask people to sit with their where their name cards are as well for the broadcast as well. I'm sure I've just spent hours in hair and makeup this morning before we started. So for the first item of the meeting, I'm going to go for apologies for absence and turn to Ben, please.
Sure thing. We've had apologies from Councillor Khan, Councillor Kilbane, Milton Brown, Orley Hunt, Claire Paxman, Nav Chauhan and Alex Miles.
That's great, thank you. I'm going to turn to item 2, which is declaration of disclosable pecuniary interest, please. And if anybody has anything to declare at this point, please. Okay, great. Sometimes stuff crops up, so please feel free to declare that when we get to that point in the meeting. Thank you. Item 3 is exempt information. There's no exempt items on today's meeting, so they'll all be held in public. Item 4 is minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of March this year. So I'm just going to ask the committee to confirm that's a true record of the meeting, and I can see nobody is objecting to that, so we'll take it as a true record. So we move on to item 5, which is the Chair's update. Couple of things on today's agenda. We have tried to move the papers so they are more thematic and a focus around particular themes rather than working through an agenda of items. So that means that for this item, all the discussion around the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and the Pillar 3 people and the skills that we lead on for the Combined Authority is all in one place. We'll be asked to approve and recommend this approach today. And in order to sort of bring that discussion together, even though it's over a couple of items, I'm going to ask everybody if we'd start the meeting to discuss that item, particularly the £40 million of funding for people and skills that's been overseen by this committee. So these are the items, these are the proposals in item 8, adult skills, and item 9, employment support. And at this point, I'd like Michelle Hunter, please, to introduce this item and start the discussion, please.
Thank you, Chair. I do have some slides that Josh will share on screen in a moment. Thanks, Josh. So just moving on to the next slide. So Pillar 3 is people and skills. So just as by way of recap, just to note the alignment to the West Yorkshire Investment Strategy. So the aims of this pillar are to support those who are furthest away from employment and to create opportunities for individuals to move towards work. So just the slide just illustrates where that links to the West Yorkshire Investment Strategy. So just moving on, please, Josh. So just a note on the existing allocations of Pillar 3. So the Multiply programme and the hyperlocal projects have all come out of Pillar 3, and what's remaining from that pillar is 14 million of revenue core funding, which will go out to open call. The majority will go out to open call. So then on the next slide, please. So in terms of the proposed allocations, this slide just illustrates how we've proposed that 14 million is divided. So just to reiterate that, although the timescales for this is extremely tight, we're really keen to work with this committee and seek feedback and thoughts on these proposals. The interventions on screen have been prioritised as part of the Employment and Skills Committee pipeline of funding, which has been approved and discussed at this committee for the last over the last sort of 12 to 18 months, and the proposals are based on this feedback. So the objectives outlined in these interventions are about supporting communities that are most deprived in our region through the proposed interventions that are on the screen. So Employment West Yorkshire was named as part of the in the LIP for UK SPF, and then the remainder would go out to open calls. So just moving on, just to share a bit of detail on what those calls look like. So Employment West Yorkshire committee members will be familiar with this programme. It's a tried and tested programme that's delivered through our local authorities, that's been in place since 2019. In year 2 of that delivery, so 24 to 25, we're estimating that around 4 million of the UK SPF funding would be allocated alongside the current gain share funding that's currently funding the programme. So that's what we're proposing, and we're working closely with local authorities to shape what that looks like in terms of delivery and the UK SPF outcomes and outputs. So just moving on to the next slide. So the first proposal for open call is a call around work and health. So this proposal is around creation of interventions that support entire households to address inequalities and remove barriers. This really supports the kind of the 25% of inactive people in the region who are inactive due to long-term sickness. And through our devolved funding, we already have a range of regional programmes that support adults. And it's really a call to help simplify that offer and to enable people to understand that offer, which may be sometimes confusing. And these particular individuals may find it difficult to access mainstream services. So this would be a call to support entire households who are facing health barriers to access good work. It's based on models of good practice that have been delivered in other MCA areas and has been designed and proposed in consultation with local authorities and partners in the region. And it really is about targeting individuals who are furthest away from employment, who need to access good work and sustain that work. It's really designed to enhance current delivery and to develop new innovative approaches. As a budget for this intervention, with a proposed minimum bid size of 1 million, but that is a proposed indicative funding at the moment. And then moving on to the next proposal, we're proposing something around community grants, because this has been fed back to us consistently. These that are considered hardest to reach. Across the region, we would be looking for a grants administrator, so a grant giver, to manage 2 proposals under 2 grant themes. One is around work and health, the other is around supporting those who are most disadvantaged in the labour market. And the ambition is to have a regional community grants programme that creates innovative programmes for the voluntary sector that targets people aged 16 plus, specifically looking at over 50s, in particular maybe women who are facing specific health issues, those with disabilities and prison leavers. And this is something that we've discussed at this committee over the last 12 months. Labour market intelligence tells us that a quarter of people are out of work due to ill health, and we hope that this would support some of that work. The grants should enhance existing activity in the region and support individuals to overcome barriers. We put in there some proposals that have been discussed with partners around the development of toolkits, work placements, pre-employment activity and targeted employment delivery. There's obviously a lot of good practice that's happened in the region through funding, through European funding, and we hope that this would enable partners to build on that funding from previous funding. So the proposal, the core value for this was 4 million, and we would expect partners to look at a minimum bid size of it says 4 million there, but we would look at breaking that down into perhaps 2 themes, so 2 million for that grant giver to then decide what size grants they want to give to voluntary and community sector. So then moving on to the next slide. So the final call was around youth and employment, to look at pilot activity to develop an understanding of how existing youth employment offer can be enhanced in the region, addressing the high proportion of NEETs, looking at the increasing numbers of young people who are unemployed. The call would be about bringing together partners to potentially inform a blueprint for regional youth employment offer. We've been working closely with a range of partners, local authorities, stakeholders, DWP, to look at what's currently happening within this offer at the moment. And the consensus is that there are gaps in the current youth offer, and I think this is about an opportunity to test an accessible offer for young people who are inactive or claiming benefits. So the proposal for this is an allocation of 2 million, and we would expect to see a minimum. We've proposed that we would expect a minimum bid size of 2 million for this programme. So then just moving on to the next slide, Josh. These are the design principles. So really this is about alignment to existing provision. The minimum bid size, this is proposed, but we're really keen to get thoughts from this committee about what that should look like. Encouraging match from bidders. Again, what should that look like? And looking at how deliverable this proposal is. And we've already had we've had sounding group and the LPG group, both of which have been quite keen on how we encourage that partnership and consortium approach. So that is again in the design principles. So just moving on to the next slide. The timescales are, we have the sounding group in June, and between now and September, before the calls come out, we'd really like to do some further consultation with partners to ensure that these proposals are right, and that they are really looking at where the gaps are, they're deliverable and achievable and ambitious for our region. And then by the end of September, the calls will be live with a start date of April 1st, 2024. So I think that was all I wanted to say on the summary, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And I would like to invite any questions or comments from the committee, please. Sylvia, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for going through that. So, and I noticed you said that obviously it hasn't to duplicate, which I'm sure is the first thing that most of us think when we see it. It must not duplicate. But I can see that that's easier to say than it is to achieve. And presumably, are you saying that, do you actually have a clear idea already? Although you're asking us for feedback now and the bid process hasn't started, do you feel you already have a clear idea of how to avoid that?
I think we've had several conversations with partners we've had lots of consultation and partners through this committee, through our local authorities, businesses, intermediaries, about avoiding that duplication and really addressing these gaps. But I think that will be down to part of the bidding process, and part of that process of selecting those suppliers will be about ensuring that this is about complementary activity and making sure that we're addressing gaps. The future pipeline that we've brought to this committee has always been about looking at where we don't have funding for projects already, and the proposals that we put forward are based on that pipeline activity. So the idea of that is to complement the existing activity in the region, but that will be down to the scoring criteria as well that we put in place, and how we work with partners between now and then.
Okay, can I just follow
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And so, when you read it, it does look like this is going to be practical help for individuals, and I think that's really welcome, because certainly some of the feedback I got prior to my coming here today, based on the papers, was that there was a concern. I think in the paper at number 10, there was a concern that there was talk about inspiring people when it was felt that what was actually needed was breaking down the actual practical barriers that get in the way of people furthest from the employment market. So this does read as if it's going to be much more practical and much more tailored, and so I'd certainly welcome that. And I suppose the only other comment I had was about the match funding, and I don't know how it works in this particular field, but that just can seem to be sometimes such a problem for what would otherwise be really good bidders. So I assume again you've given, well, is there have you got a view on that? You're asking for our view on it, but do you have a view on how practical and whether that's a good idea in this particular context?
I think we would usually ask for match funding, you know, as part of, you know, the funding that we offer, to demonstrate value for money and an impact of that project. And this will be a factor, and it has come through on the sounding group, particularly, you know, how we support the voluntary and community sector to be able to bid for this funding and not allow that match to be a barrier. So we've definitely considered that and fed it through to the team that are leading on the process and how that match funding will work.
Thank you. Martin, please.
Thank you. Match funding, is the match funding, is that a UK SPF requirement, or is it a local requirement that we've put on it?
Correct me if I'm wrong, colleagues, but I think that is both. I think that's both, Martin. I think it's a requirement of both. Certainly from a combined authority perspective, but I believe that is a UK SPF requirement.
Thank you. Joe, please.
I think that this presents a real great opportunity to bring some local expertise and skills and the reputation and support that they give to some of the furthest communities away from sort of work. So my view is that these proposals will really help, I think, drive some people nearer to employment support and the mainstream employment support. I think in particular the youth suggestion, I would say I've been part of that party to sort of look at those proposals. But I think what we've got an opportunity to do here is, in the context of a rising caseload of youth unemployment, and it's one of the biggest in the country, we've got an opportunity to bring, I think, partners together who bring their expertise and are working with young people in one physical space. And we've been running youth hubs in DWP for some time. The evaluation that we've done with our participants is that they've really valued having a space that's been a different environment, a range of partners in to support them to address the barriers to work. So I think addressing some of the other comments around practical support, I do see these proposals as really helping to achieve that, and I think bringing together the key partners, perhaps an opportunity to bring us together and align us closer.
Thank you, Joe. Tim, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just building on that, is it possible as part of a proposal as well to look at how we can encourage business to be talking to schools? So actually, we're not getting to the point of increasing the needs as they leave. We're having those discussions earlier, so they don't become needs in the first place. Yeah? So the businesses are sharing their knowledge about the important workplace skills, looking at the opportunities, whether that's through T-levels apprenticeships, yeah, all those pathways. One of the challenges seems to be getting businesses encouraged and motivated to do that, because I believe that would make a big difference and really help those go on the right pathway and not end up neat.
Thank you, Tim. Do you want to come back into this point, Michelle?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Tim, that, yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the pathways we need to consider, you know, the pathways for individuals who are accessing the programmes and how they, you know, access the plethora of opportunities that are available to them and how we engage businesses within that is absolutely crucial. Thank you.
Phil, please.
I just wanted to make a bit of a point of clarification to Martin's earlier question, which Michelle answered around the match funding requirement. Across UK SPF, there are some things I think that require match funding, but not everything. And I think we've decided locally to apply kind of match funding requirements to everything. But if the committee felt there were some issues around that, I think that's something we might want to minute. I know a couple of people have raised that.
Thank you. Martin, please.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, I think when we were looking at Brexit, one of the promises was we'd have more flexibility of what to do locally. And in the last round of ESIF funding, the match funding was probably the biggest thing we heard about, was causing problems with organisations looking to bid into it. And now we have far less money, and in particular the social enterprises that may be wanting to deliver on this element of the UK SPF may really struggle to find the match funding. So a more flexible approach, I think, would be very useful for me.
Thank you. Colin, please.
Yeah, I'm not clear where is it envisaged that the match funding comes from, and then what are the rules around it? Because in previous rounds, it was the rules around match funding that caused a lot of the difficulty, and so where is it envisaged it will come from?
Thanks, Colin. Michelle, please.
I think those are definitely discussions that we need to have with partners about, you know, to make sure that we're not putting that barrier in place for partners to prevent the match funding isn't preventing them from applying.
Yes, please, Colin.
Yeah, so most of the other funding that most providers have requirements against it, which means we can't use it as match funding, which just, so you get nowhere. You won't get a bid because we'll look at it and go, well, we can't use any of our existing funding as match funding, therefore we can't bid.
I think we'd be happy to take that away and discuss it with our colleagues who are leading on the process for SPF funding and bring a response back to the committee, if that's okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Colin. Sylvia, please.
Yes, thanks, Chair. It was. I'm just noting that in the briefing that I got from my officer, I think it says that the recognition that allocating funds through a community grant system would enable key VCS organisations across the region to access key funding through UK SPF. So it sounds as if at some point in an officer discussion there's been some suggestion that that's one way for them to, I don't know what a community grant system means, but there has been some discussion about how that, whatever it is, might provide some assistance for, but that's just for VCS and that might not necessarily cover social enterprise. So.
Would you like to come back, Michelle, please?
Yeah, I think again we can feed that in. My understanding is it does, but we can feed that in and double check.
Thank you, Michelle. Does anybody else want to come in on this item, please? I don't see anybody else coming in. So, in terms of the recommendations, we've been given this a good going over, and thank you everybody for your comments on this. What we'll do is, in terms of the items that we're taking forward, we'll make sure that the comments that have been made are picked up in terms of the particularly the UK SPF provision, and the issues around match funding are picked up, and we're able to respond to those later on. Thank you everybody for your comments on that. We'll come back to those. So I'm going to go back to the turning back to the agenda. We're going to move on to item 6, which is governance arrangements, and I'll pass over to Phil, please.
Thanks, Chair. So only a really quick item. So this is an item that comes annually, which confirms some of the things that happened in the annual combined authority meeting last month, and is a paper that outlines the committee arrangements for the coming year, including membership, including our quorum, including the meeting dates, and also there's a couple of annexes. One of which is the terms of reference, and one of which includes the membership changes. Which the chair referred to. So welcome to the two new elected members joining the committee. So really, it's an item for information.
Thank you. Does anybody want to comment on this item? Phil, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just on the advisory representatives table, there's Bill Adams down there for the TUC, and Bill retires in about 3 weeks' time. So I don't think he'll be attending future meetings, unfortunately. So if it's possible for my name to be put down there as an interim, there is a replacement for Bill, and we'll notify who that person will be at a later date.
Absolutely, we'll make those changes. And I'm just looking at governance who have nodding at me, so that's fine.
Thanks, Phil. We've noted that. Is there anything else on this item? Graham, please.
Just one quick question. It's been suggested by our team that the chairs of the local and skills boards in the 5LA areas are non-voting members of this committee.
So is that a proposal you're bringing now?
Yes.
Right.
The 5 chairs of the local and employment skills board should be at this committee, but with non-voting rights.
Phil, please.
Thank you for that point. I think a number of authorities have expressed something along those lines to us. I think it's something we need to pick up with the governance teams. It would be helpful if that was minuted, because that will help Michelle and team have that conversation with governance, and we will have to come back to that with a recommendation at the next meeting. I think with things like this, it has to go through various processes, but we hear the view.
Thank you. Sylvia, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have too much time in my hands, and I was looking at the terms of reference and noted it said that we are to liaise with the Business Economy and Innovation Committee. And I'm not sure I ever remember us actually ever doing that. And I just wondered whether I've missed that or whether we can do something more about making sure we do. And also there's the next one, which is promoting in collaboration with the other committees, all the things that it lists. But in particular, I would have thought we should be trying to liaise with the Climate Committee to make sure we're looking at green jobs holistically.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Sylvia. Phil, do you want to come in, please?
That's an excellent point. I think there are some mechanisms for some committee members to do that through different groups, for example, the LEP group, but not as a whole scale. So this is my last meeting as the lead director on this, but Felix will be joining us for the next meeting and onwards, is also the lead director for this committee, for the business committee and for the culture committee. So he'll be very good at kind of helping to draw those links. But I think for the skills and business one, which I know about most, there is a lot of crossover on agendas. And I think we might need to think about how formally and informally we bring some of those agendas together, particularly when we're listening to the voice of the employer and skills provider and learner together to shape the economy of the future. Similarly, the message is well heard on the place and environment agenda, where skills is really, really important to make sure, facilitators to make sure we achieve our ambitions in those areas. So I will pick that up in the first instance with Felix and Liz Hunter, who is the lead director for that, and I'm happy for that to be minuted.
Thank you. Somebody else want to come in on this item, please? Okay, with the comments made, are we happy to, the recommendation is to note the report, and clearly there's a couple of things to pick up from noting the report, so if everybody's happy with that, we'll move on to item 7, please. Martin, I think you're prepared for this to come in and give us an update on the progress of the local schools improvement plan, please.
Yes, thank you very much. There's a paper which Sonia and the team have prepared, which is a really good background. So hopefully people have read that into where the local skills improvement plans have come from and how they've got to this stage. So it's my intention just to give you an update today on where we've got to in this region. So the research started. We started speaking to businesses and looking at all existing research and data that was available for skills in November. The idea of these plans are not to become a strategy in their own right, but to be a form of data and a tool that can be used by all those developing other strategies, including this committee, to understand the views primarily of businesses and employers, more generally the views of businesses and what their requirements are for the future and perhaps some of the issues that they're having and what their plans are, and to incorporate that into everything else that's going on in the area. Not least the work that's been done previously by the LEPIA and the Combined Authority, who, as I've said numerous times before, are really up to speed on skills. Their analysis as good as anywhere in the country, where some places it's perhaps not quite so good. We've spoken to just under 900 businesses on top of looking at all of the existing data in between the November and May, which it sounds like a lot of businesses to speak to, but isn't really enough to develop a future skills strategy from, which is why I'm saying it's got to be taken for what it is. It's not. It's £500,000 worth of work over 3 years, not £1 million every 6 months to come up with the data. So it's understanding and having a deeper conversation with businesses about what their future skills requirements are. We had to compile all of this data and submit an initial recommendation of what a local skills improvement plan should be to the Department for Education by the 31st of May, which was done. It was a maximum of 30 pages, and that plan, unfortunately, we're not able to circulate it as yet as a whole, because it's not agreed as a local skills improvement plan until it's actually been approved by the Department for Education. We're just trying to seek some clarity on how we could share that wider to get some more opinions. We've had lots of conversations with businesses, so they were asked to either fill in a questionnaire, which some did online. There was a short questionnaire, a longer questionnaire, and then there were conversations with them, so more of a deeper dive where issues arisen. As you may have heard me say before in this committee, when you ask a business what its skills needs are for the future, it often tells you what jobs it's got available now, and so it really is about how we try and tie those things together and take into account how we try and help business articulate its own requirements for the future. Is the real challenge over the next 2 years with these. So the plan was submitted on the 31st of May. Initial feedback was received a couple of weeks ago, 16th of June, and that was very general feedback, which I understand has been the same to all local skills improvement plan deliverers around the country, and it's mostly on almost points of order. It's on the detail, so it's saying don't criticise national funding policy and things like that, which we've got no intention of doing this, criticising the policy or existing delivery of how these things happen. It's supposed to assist us in make recommendations. We are now awaiting further feedback that is due by the 23rd of July, and hopefully at that stage we'll be able to share the local skills improvement plan. And at this time we're in the process of developing a delivery plan, and that's not delivering of the outcomes, that's not a delivering of the training requirements that have come up, it's a delivery of the next stage of the plan, which is further research and further looking at all of the data and further conversations with business to help create this picture of what the skills system needs to look like in the future. By skills system, I mean the requirements that businesses will have in the future. There's and so that's due by the 23rd of July, and then there's that will be followed up by a route map, which is very much around what happens in the next 2 years. It's very similar to a delivery plan, and again, it's not to do with delivery except of the local skills improvement plan itself. The initial plans, we've made some recommendations which are in the paper of some cross-cutting themes and some sectors that we should do a further deep dive with and get some further conversations. We obviously need a lot more conversations in some different areas with different industries as well. But it's highlighted a couple of interesting things. It's highlighted businesses are saying a few things for us, and that's that they really value independent advice and guidance. And by that, I was thinking, Michelle and I have just been in the meeting this morning, and we were talking about that, and I was trying to think of a better way to articulate it. That independent advice and guidance isn't about what's available. It's about, what's available, what we're all delivering. It's around what it is they could do. So it's someone telling them, right, this is the kind of thing you could do. So rather than tying it into saying that course is available that week and this will start. So that's what they mean by independent advice and guidance. And the other thing is that they like the idea of lots of shorter programs, so 1-2 day kind of programs being delivered to address the need. And although we don't necessarily want to hear this, qualifications are not important to the employer. They're important to the employee, but to the employer they're not as important, either as a recruitment tool or as a mechanism showing their staff have got the skills that are required. So it's a watch this space and wait for the 23rd of July. With it being DFE, there's no chance of that deadline slipping beyond the 23rd of July. So I'm happy to take any questions, and I think Sonja, you wanted to ask if there are any sort of comments on the way it's done, which is at the beginning of your paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Are there any questions or comments? Shirley, please.
Thank you, Martin. I was wondering if the 900 businesses, what proportion of that is there of the total number of businesses that we have, and also what's the breakdown? Were they largely SMEs or were they large businesses?
They're mostly SMEs, a tiny proportion. It's nowhere near enough to have a serious study. It's just an indication. The real work starts in the next 2 years when we speak to many more. I would think that every college will speak to more businesses than that almost on a monthly basis that we've got, but asking different questions, and for different reasons. Yeah. So, but it's what you do in a 4-month period. That's what you get for a very limited sum of money. So as a percentage, it's not. They are mostly SMEs. There was not one charity in that cohort, which I thought was interesting. 1 or 2 social enterprises, but mostly SMEs. We've got a full breakdown. We're trying to find a way that we can share the data of this with a local authority level on the numbers and on the sectors that are available, which will give directly to the officers at the local authority.
Yeah, because I guess as more employers and big employers get to hear about the LSIP and whatever might happen and how it evolves in the future, they might be thinking, well, I didn't know about it. And so one question was like, how do you reach out? But the other one is, I just get a bit nervous when you tell me what the 900 is, and then we might get a narrative which says businesses in West Yorkshire and North Yorkshire don't value qualifications, when actually if you asked a different type of organisation, might value them very much.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, but these are based on the rationale for these has come from businesses, not business organisations, but businesses telling ministers over many years that what's out there at the moment doesn't work and doesn't fit their needs. And it is consistent around that, the qualifications. There is a consistent view of that, and it's also consistent around the country. Most of these are being delivered, there's 38 around the country, most are being delivered by Chambers of Commerce. I think there are 3 that aren't, and that is consistent around the country. So, and where there will be a similar amount of responses, I think there are 1 lower from each of those 38 areas.
That might be a consistent narrative, isn't it, from a section of businesses?
Yeah.
And what do we do about that? And there's many others. Thanks.
Thank you. I can see Peter and Colin want to come in. So, Peter, please.
Thanks, Chair. And I think Shirley makes a valid point. It's something, Martin, I think we discussed at the West Yorkshire LSIP board. What is the weight being put vis-a-vis the 900 who were surveyed or took part in the survey compared to all the in-depth analysis that we all have, or all of us compile and put together. I think that was a question we were asking sort of DFE. Got all this rigour, analysis, understanding, and you speak to 900 businesses or as part of the survey. As important as that is, but I think it was just understanding that weight, and I think the LSIP board and the chamber were trying to make that case to government. And I think, you know, it's a difficult task, but I think, yeah, that's an important point.
Thank you. I'll bring Colin in, please.
Yeah, I think this item is titled Influencing the System, and the system being post-16 education. So I've got some broad points about how this committee might seek to influence the system. My first point is we've been talking about LSIPs, and particularly in relation to 16 to 18-year-olds, there's only half of the system is required to pay any attention to them, which is a fundamental flaw nationally in the system. So in answer to the question, how do we influence the system, we should be saying that to national government and the DFE, that half of the system that's supposed to be influenced is not a part of LSIPs. So what I'm talking about is the fact that half of our 16 to 18-year-olds are in school sixth forms, academies, or sixth form colleges that come under academy regulations, who have no requirement to pay any attention to LSIPs. My second point is I'm just going to read something out, and I'm fascinated as to what the local authority representatives in the room really think about this. This is the 1996 Education Act, which very clearly says that local authorities have a legal requirement to secure sufficient suitable education and training for all young people in their area, which includes, to fulfil this, local authorities need to have a strategic overview of the provision available in their area and to identify and resolve gaps in provision. Now, that legal requirement seems to fit perfectly with influencing the system, working with LSIPs, all working together. But the national system at the moment gives not only no power to local authorities, but completely ignores local authorities, even in the basic level of consultation, when investing in increased capacity in local areas. And I would highlight that by the most recent grants available nationally for post-16 growth to meet demographic growth. All of the decisions were made centrally, with not even a cursory consultation with any local structures, either WICA or local authorities. The result of which is that we have an expansion in capacity for the only thing that we've got an excess in places for, and insufficient further investment in T-levels, technical qualifications, provision for young people who are likely to be NEET, and provision that creates a pathway into all of the areas that we're talking about. So there's a fundamental flaw in the system nationally, and this item is called influencing the system. So I suppose my question is, what will this committee do about trying to really influence the fundamental flaws in the system?
Thank you, Colin.
Yeah, it's just a point of clarity around the delivery, and I think you're going to touch on the Local Skills Improvement Fund as well. But this is not about the learner. This is about the need of the employer and the economy and the business. So it's deliberately not about the learner. It wouldn't be a business representative organisation and not the one to advise on skills and on the right on the minutiae of that and how it's delivered. This is purely around the need of the organisations that we're speaking to, which may make it a bit easier. And on the national policy side, as I said earlier, we've been told to keep out of it, but we accept that it's the way we fund skills and education is why it is delivered in the way it is, and so unless we change that, it will carry on being delivered in the way it is, and so I agree it needs a much bigger conversation.
Shirley, please.
Well, I just wanted to make the point that for the learner to have the best experience and the best possible chance of getting the right qualification or experience at the right time with the right employer, then the employers and the providers need to work together to make that happen. So I think it is actually about the learner and the employer.
Thank you, Shirley. Would anybody else like? Sylvia, please.
Thank you. In terms of what you just said, Colin, about what local authorities think, well, I mean, local authorities know it's all ridiculous, and it's like that for nearly so many aspects of what we have to do, where we are expected to deliver but not given the resources or the power to do so. So that's, yes, it's the case, but it's the case in just about everything. So everybody just sort of shrugs their shoulders and tries to work within what they've got, don't they? So I assume this will all come back to us when we're allowed to see it. When they let us see it, because I think at the moment it's difficult because we're being asked to comment on something we can't see. Just the... Oh, there was just one other thing that somebody said I was going to ask about. No, it's okay. That's mostly the point. We are going to see it again, aren't we?
Thank you, Sylvia. Martin, please.
Yeah, it will be circulated as soon as vote, but that's once it's already received approval. Just so you're aware, that will have received approval from the DFE, and that's the process that we're having to work with. So there's no formal reason for it to come back to here as far as DFE are concerned. However, it will come back to here in one way or another at the appropriate time for discussion and looking at how we implement it, and over the coming years how we make the most of it, how we make it a tool that's useful to this committee to use to add to all of the other tools that we have.
Sorry, I remembered what the third thing was.
Please, Sylvia.
So it was just that you say that the SMEs, as they are primarily, are saying they're not interested in qualifications, but presumably they are interested in the skills. It's just they want them without, they're not, how those skills are arrived at. They don't care. They just want the skill.
Yeah, they want the training for them. So it sounds slightly crass, but if there's something free that comes with a qualification because it's funded, then they'll do that, even though it may not be quite right for their business, rather than paying for it themselves. I'd much rather, if I'm honest, have the money themselves for free. It's public funding always creates this slight anomaly in what businesses will spend their money on.
Thank you, Martin. Shirley, please.
Yeah, just a point that might help us when we're talking to our colleagues about the LSIP. So when it's been developed, not many of us have seen it, and I know that you can't call it a proper. The plan isn't the plan till it is approved, but there's draft versions of it, and I can't believe actually that the Department of Education would say you can't share the drafts with stakeholders in the development of the plan that you're going to submit. Sounds bizarre. So I think people are a bit like thinking, really? Is that really the case? Yes. That they can't share drafts in the development of it? Yeah, I've not anything like it.
But there is, I'm afraid it is the case on the plan itself, on drafts, but we engage. So we have a member of every local authority at a senior level on the board. We have the colleges who sit on the board who have seen it, have been involved in the development of this. The universities are on the board.
Those
There's
drafts
businesses.
are available. You could share them. Those drafts could be shared with stakeholders. So if somebody wanted to see the draft, they could see it in reality then.
Through your local, if they choose to give it to you, but we have to, we're contracted by DFE to do what they tell us to do, and that's don't circulate a plan until it's drafted. But also, it's gone in the timescales of it. If you think of the reality of trying to deliver a plan from November to finish it by May, and jumping through, that's why it's come to.
So I know Colin wants to come in, Martin, but could we bring the next stage of the plan to this committee, please? I know you've said you're working to the DFE. You're working to the DFE structures and timetables, and we all work with government departments. We appreciate what you're saying, but are you able to bring it a future version to this committee, please?
Yes, but what do we, I'm happy to present a version of it.
Yeah.
But to give it a formal role in the development of the LSIP, then that's not within our power to do.
Thank you. That's a means to be able to present it to us. Thanks, Martin. Colin, please.
Yeah, a long experience of working with employers, so which is great. But I'm just gonna say a word of warning about employers who don't want qualifications and don't see part of the content of qualifications as relevant. Most employers want training that's specific to the people in their jobs, but public funding should be used to provide training for people who can move from that employer and get a job with another employer. And over 40 years, every time I've spoken to an employer, they're not interested in that, but it's public funding. And as an economy, and for those individuals, we should be interested in that.
Thank you, Colin. You mentioned a little bit ago, Martin, about the local skills investment funds. Do you want to say a little bit about that as well, please? Colin, please.
Very briefly, so the West Yorkshire Colleges Consortium, which is a partnership of the 7 FE colleges in West Yorkshire, has received £100,000 of mobilisation funding in order to bid for a pot of 7 million investment fund, which is the Local Skills Investment Fund. All of the local colleges are involved in doing that, alongside some private training providers and 1 or 2 providers from outside West Yorkshire who have West Yorkshire students, which pretty much is what we're required to do, to be honest. So that's been put together, that's been submitted, we're awaiting for what happens next.
Thanks, Colin. Are there any more questions or comments on this item, please? I don't see anybody wanting to come in. I'm going to turn to the recommendation, which is that we note the contents of the report. And I think we've given it a good noting. This afternoon, there's a couple of things will come in the minutes to come back to future meeting. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to turn to item 8, the adult skills report, and invite Pippa to give us an update, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I just want to give you a bit overview of Multiply on our first year. So despite the challenges of delivery in such a short window of time, there's been actually huge successes. The team quickly mobilised, creating a responsive partnership of our local authorities, the West Yorkshire FE colleges, who delivered to just under 2,000 West Yorkshire residents across various Multiply interventions. This resulted in 82% of the DFE targets were achieved. The FE booster programmes were a real success, supporting those who are 19 plus on vocational programmes who were maybe slightly reluctant to engage normally in numeracy, but gave them a real handhold support to increase their math skills. And money management programmes supporting communities and individuals on budgeting with a real focus on the cost of living crisis were the most successful interventions. Capacity building has been hugely welcomed, in particular from our FE colleges. So what's next? So the DFE cannot confirm if growth will be available, although they've given us some flexibility to move money between interventions by around 35%. So year 1 has given us the opportunity to learn and understand the demand and challenges facing engagement, and capacity building has been so successful, with over 406% against our DFE profile. Also, further consultation has found that the cost of delivering capacity building will actually be lower than initially planned. Therefore, the team are proposing to reduce funds slightly for capacity building across 2 years in order to offer an increase to those FE boosters and the individual focus strands to reach more people who need support with their maths and numeracy skills. Alex Miles from Wilp asked whether Multiply the capacity building can include any training organisation who delivers numeracy, rather than just those who currently have multiply funding. So the initial guidance from the DFE did state that all individuals who receive the capacity building training must be delivering multiply, but the future strategy will be to widen out capacity building to all FE colleges and independent training providers and community organisations that are in the first instance delivering multiply, but we absolutely recognise the need to invest in the sector to create a legacy. Any comments?
Thanks, Pippa. Are there any comments on multiply, please? I don't see anybody, thank you.
So moving on to the community learning review. So in 2022, we commissioned an independent consultant to undertake a review of our AEB funded community learning provision. The aims of this review to understand more fully the impact of the funding and the provision so we could champion its use and consider ways to improve the impact across the region. The review found considerable good practice amongst West Yorkshire providers, supported by skilled practitioners with expertise in learner support, engagement with the hardest to reach communities and empowerment. There is a strong foundation of quality of delivery upon which to build, which we are currently working with providers to remain focused on priorities and sharing best practice. The review recommends more consistency in funding usage with more strategic direction from the West Yorkshire Combined Authority as how to use the funding, including geographical targeting. There are 2 actions proposed as a result of the review. These actions aim to improve the impact of community learning investment by focusing funding on geographies based on need and providing more local strategic direction informed by our local authorities on how organisations use the funds. We are bringing this to the committee at an early stage so that committee members' views can shape our approach, and would like them to consider moving to community learning allocations to a needs-based methodology. For reference, UK SPF adopted a needs-based methodology as detailed in the Employment and Skills paper, and the DFE have discussed moving towards a needs-based methodology for AEB, although currently there are no timescales communicated. Any questions?
Thank you, Pippa. Are there any questions on the community learning review? Phil, please.
Thanks, Chair. It's more of a comment, really. We've been approached by an organisation called WEA at the TUC, the Workers' Educational Association, and they've raised issues with funding and their status in relation to the Adult and Community Learning ACL review, especially around section 4.13, without getting too technical. I believe this is now being looked at within the Combined Authority, so I think the WA have reached out to you. Is that correct? Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was the case.
Yes, we met with them this week and we are reviewing their status.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Phil. Tim, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just very briefly from an HE perspective to express very positive support for community learning. There is reference in the paper and I think in the report to the progression potential, but it's very specifically about adult skills provision. I think you could talk to HE providers and very quickly identify excellent practice around progression ultimately into higher education and indeed through to highly skilled employment. And for example, where in the recommendations at 18 there is points about celebrating great practice and points about progression pathways, I'd encourage that we make sure it isn't simply about access to adult skills, important though those are, that it's also about access through to higher education and high skilled employment.
Thanks, Tim.
I just got a question about what needs-based methodology actually means.
Pippa, would you like to come back on that question, please?
Yes, so really what we're looking for is a needs-based methodology. So currently, as I said, SPF use the needs-based methodology. I was just going to, it's on 2.29 in the paper about how that was calculated, So it looks at proportion of funding levels. It allocates 70% of funding based on population, 30% of funding based on productivity, skills, unemployment rate, population density and household income. So that would be a methodology of need.
Thank you, Pippa. Sylvia, please.
Thank you. Well, I did say that I was going to complain a lot today, and unfortunately this is the item where I suppose Calderdale is probably most unhappy, because obviously we're going to suffer a whopping loss if you change the methodology, and we note that that you're saying that you will make that up to us, but it wasn't clear how long you'd be making that up to us, and it's clearly hard when we persuaded our council to vote for devolution. You're trying to persuade the people that it's going to mean more control over your money and possibly more money, and actually what's happening, we're getting less money, so it's quite hard for us to sell. So that was the first question really, was how long do we get that top up? And I think we're unhappy because we feel that there's no indication that there's any recognition of whether actually we've been using our money wisely. And also, I think, and this is a point I think Calderdale makes in other committees, that larger authorities have economies of scale that we don't have. So there's no consideration of that when you just use these blanket funding mechanisms like the needs-based one. So we are concerned. We accept that we're not going to lose out at the moment, but we want to know what prospects also that you think there are for any growth in the future, because obviously if we're going to get more, then it's easier to say to people, well, actually, yes, it's all right because we think we're going to get more. But I mean, I must say at the moment I can't see how it's going to happen.
Pippa, please.
I mean, I take on what you're saying, and I think it's whether it's decided that a needs-based methodology, which there will be some areas that benefit and some that don't, because it's based on a methodology of need, whether that's something that we'd want to take forward. But I hear your comments.
So, transitional arrangements, how long?
So there's a few options. If a needs-based methodology was something that what we wanted to explore further, then we would look at whether we maintained long-term your allocation for Calderdale, or those allocations stayed as it is. That's one of the options in the paper. But I think and also what we're really looking at is a improved measure of impact, and that's clear something we want to the social and the things that you've just mentioned that you don't feel like are highlighted strongly about the success and how well the funding's spent. We're looking at a regional way of measuring social impact as well of our community learning, so we can shout louder and really demonstrate the benefits of community learning.
Thanks, Pippa. Colin, please.
Yeah, so I'm not clear whether geographical needs-based means shifting money to providers based in those areas, or ensuring that there's a set of rules that mean that the money's used for students from those postcodes. In the latter case, any methodology around that tends to increase bureaucracy and is quite difficult to manage. Either way, it would probably shift money from one provider to another. So you've then got the problem of there'll be redundancies in some providers and expansion in others. And as far as I'm aware, the adult education budget didn't have waiting lists in most places. So if you're moving money away from places that have waiting lists for adults to go on courses, those waiting lists will increase. And you can move it into another area, but if the demand isn't there, we'll just end up with an underspent budget. There are huge risks in this, I'm just pointing out.
So this is just about community learning, and actually our providers currently, the data shows that they only deliver in their localities where, because it's so hyper-local, it's delivered right in the communities, right? So it's so different to maybe AEB, which definitely that would happen. Yeah, so that's.
I'm happy to hear it's just community learning.
Thank you, Colin. I've got Shirley then Tim, please. Shirley, please.
Yeah, it's really to comment. I can understand what Sylvia's saying, but there's a point really about trying to be very deliberate where you want to make impact, and in being deliberate, you've really got to think about where the need is, and I guess it comes down to the definition of need, and then the ability to demonstrate that that need has been met through whatever mechanisms. So I'm supportive of a needs-based assessment because it's deliberate in design to encourage inclusive growth, but you've got to get the mechanisms right in terms of measures and outcomes.
Thank you. Tim, please.
Thank you. If I could ask, in terms of this methodology, has it been used in other combined authorities? Is there evidence that this works? Yeah, and are we trailblazing here, or have others already trodden this path?
In terms of needs-based methodology for community learning, it hasn't been used in other MCAs, although obviously it's currently is being used for SBFF on a hyper-local model, and for Multiply, that's how it was regionally distributed on a local authority level.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Graham, please.
Thanks. We here in Kirklees, we're quite happy because we've got a nice little uplift in there, which is fine because we think we've been historically underfunded anyway. We are disappointed, however, that Calderdale has taken a hit, and we don't think other LAs should necessarily suffer for that. So we need to make sure that other local authorities are protected with that. So, but in broad, we are in favour of D, and we welcome the uplift, but not at the expense of our colleagues in Calderdale.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to come in on this item, please? Sylvia, please.
Yeah, so, sorry, could I just ask for clarification then? So when, obviously you're saying you now want to move to this model where you're able to assess the effectiveness, and how soon do you think you're going to be able to see that after this would start?
In terms of the effectiveness of a needs-based methodology, I think we would be looking within the next 6 to 8 months of working with our providers. So we have 3 providers who aren't geographically bound, whereas about their community learning, and we can work with them to work with the local authorities to support them to deliver in those areas that are maybe slightly underrepresented, and then within the first 6 to 8 months we'll be able to assess how that's working for them to move towards that within this next 12 months.
Thank you. And I think it is. I don't see anybody else wanting to come in on this on this item. The recommendations we asked to agree are to comment on. I think it's really important to comment on and recommend. I think it's really important that this review has come to this committee at an early stage. I think there's quite a lot of issues that have been raised here. To oh, sorry. One more thing on adult skill, thank you.
Thank you. So I wanted to bring to your attention about guided learning hours. So as part of the 10% rate increase that the Combined Authority address cost-cutting tactics employed by some providers and ensure that the rate increase is aligned to improve the impact for learners. So we've held a round table with providers to understand the reasons why sometimes there is a delivery under the guided learning hours, and where there are valid reasons we needed to who have already made changes to their rules to learn the impacts of the changes they've made and lessons learned. So from this, we'd like your thoughts on the following proposals. So the first item was to ensure that planned guided learning hours are entered on cost-cutting tactics. When we've consulted with providers, currently they are already entering planned guided learning hours. It's just we don't gather that data, so this would be more about making it mandatory to include that information. Below 70% of the guided learning hours, and a reduction of any funding if planned hours are below 50% of the guided learning hours. We're looking at introducing a specific sector-based work academy approved codes programme, which are going to have set funding values for 23-24, and we're working with this pilot. And the removal of pure distance learning to be considered for introduction for 24-25 following evaluation of the changes implemented and the impact on the range of provision. And Alex Miles from WILP asked for her comments to be recorded on this. So she agreed with all points in relation to guided learning hours recommendation and for funding to support only those who are priority. However, the phase out of fully online remote learning needs further consideration, as although teaching hours may not be involved, there is a pedagogical development on the course. I agree this should be limited but not phased out completely. Any comments?
Thank you, Pippa. Any comments on the guided learning hours, please? Colin, please.
Very brief, all seems very sensible.
Thank you. Any more comments? Questions? No, I don't see any, so I'll definitely turn to the recommendations now that we take forward. I see everybody is happy with those, and I'll move on to item 9, the employment support item about supporting our residents. And I'll ask Sonia to introduce this paper, please.
Thank you, Chair. So you have in your packs quite a comprehensive paper, starting with a labour market analysis. And as you'll see, the labour market in West Yorkshire remains strong, with growing employment and job vacancies. However, economic inactivity remains higher in West Yorkshire than it does nationally, at 3 points above the national level. And in particular, those disadvantaged in the labour market have lower employment rates and higher levels of inactivity. And West Yorkshire performs lower than the national average across all protected characteristics. Whilst the unemployment claimant count is on a downward trend, it still remains 25% higher than pre-pandemic levels and higher than the national average. The number of people in work claiming benefits also remains high. And sadly, for the second year across West Yorkshire, NEET figures continue to rise, with some local variances, including Wakefield, was actually on a downward trajectory, and Kirklees, which remains more or less stable. What this does is paint a picture that there's a greater demand and need for employment support services. Some of the things that we are already doing to address this in West Yorkshire include working really closely with our DWP colleagues. So you will know that we have a joint action plan with DWP that looks to align some of our work where we have priorities in common. More recently, combined authority officers from police and crime teams, the violence reduction units, employment and skills, with local authority and Job Centre Plus officers have come together with existing providers to consider how we might innovate a youth hub offer. This is at very early stages, but we feel that this is something that needs tackling in a partnership approach. There's examples of great practice happening already, and we want to learn from those and develop a blueprint which we'd love to bring back to this committee as that model emerges. The second key area is the flagship employment support programme, Employment Hubs, Employment West Yorkshire, which, as you will all know, is regionally coordinated and delivered by local authority partners That programme has supported over 12,000 people over the past few years and will continue to support 7,000 people towards and into work by March 2025. So going forward, and to help on our really strong track record in this field, we're proposing to develop a piece of partnership work and create a blueprint for employment support that will consider the current context and challenges of the existing system and how we can affect system change and achieve better outcomes for our residents. In short, what a devolved system might look like. This work would build on the work that this committee is already overseeing through the Future Ready Skills Commission and the Employment Skills Framework, and help establish an agreed policy position in West Yorkshire and support the work towards the next stage of deeper devolution and some of the things we've seen recently in Trailblazer deals. So if agreed, the scope set out in detail in this paper for an employment support blueprint will be taken forward for wider consultation and engagement with stakeholders from the wider sector and individuals, including service users from across the region, including members of this committee and your networks.
Thanks, Sonia. Has anybody got any questions or comments on this item, please? Sylvia, please.
Thank you, Chair. So, the officers who've been involved in this have said that they really welcomed the opportunity to input to the work that's gone so far, and they look forward to the blueprint, but they are just expressing slight concerns that it's the usual thing, it's also complicated, and is there going to be overlap, and they just want to guard against that, and that they want to keep a focus on devolution to the local authorities and not concentrating it at the West Yorkshire level, so that the authorities don't end up feeling, the officers in the authorities don't end up feeling sidelined. So that was just the concern, that whilst they understand the need to do it and they want to do it, that's just the concern they have. Thanks.
Thank you. Sonia, please.
Thank you, that's noted. And we have an internal project group which includes local authority officers, and part of the scope and the work that we'll do will very much look at the roles and responsibilities.
Thank you. Is there anybody else on this item, please? Colin, please.
I'm just looking at the NEETs figures in the middle of the paper, which are an interesting reversal on the density of jobs. So the highest NEETs figures in Leeds, and Leeds has the highest density of jobs, which seems counterintuitive. Any explanation?
Lots of people work in Leeds that don't live here. I don't know if Sonia wants to give a more detailed. Don't know if Sonia wants to give another explanation, but yeah, there's a great number of people that work in Leeds that don't live here.
That's correct, and it's an excellent question. I don't think I've got anything to add, sadly.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I
Colin,
just respond, Chair? In which case, we need to be ensuring that those young people who live in Leeds can get those jobs.
I agree. Thank you. Are there any more questions, or should we turn to the recommendations and check everybody is happy with those recommendations? That's great, thank you. If we could move on to item 10, please, Michelle.
Thank you very much. So we've included some rationale in the paper about why careers, education, information and guidance is so important at different ages and stages. So right from primary, where young people unconsciously start ruling options out really early, particularly along gender lines, but also cultural, to do with the economic background, to do with kind of the area they live in and the sort of people they see around them. So you can see that really early on, through, of course, one's educational life and through to working life as well, and those times where people are looking to retrain and upskill and access new careers. So we've included in some information about the kind of proven economic impact and economic importance of that advice, as well as, of course, the social and societal. It is important to note that the vast majority of support on the careers agenda is nationally commissioned, including, of course, through the National Careers Service, and then in terms of helping schools to connect with employers through the Careers and Enterprise Company. So mayoral combined authorities and LEPs have a delivery role, and of course there's a lot of local match funding that goes into that, but it's very much a national model that we in fact have a contract to deliver against. So in the paper here, I wanted to draw your attention in particular to the performance of what we're doing at a regional level. So we have a really long track record in the combined authority of working with our 180 plus schools and colleges to improve their performance towards the Gatsby benchmarks of good careers guidance, and that work continues in line with the kind of national model that has we now have a regional careers hub through which we support peer learning for teachers. We've had some fantastic events recently where teachers have gone out into industry. It's very much actually the kind of things that Tim was talking about earlier about supporting that interface between business and education. We have a regional all-age careers platform called Future Goals, which we continue to make improvements to. We did want to draw your attention in particular to an offer really that we've received regionally from the Careers and Enterprise Company, who have been set up by government to work with MCAs and LEPs to support schools to improve their careers performance. As part of that contract, for the first time, they're being asked to work with primaries, which is great. Actually, previously work has been exclusively with secondaries. But of their nearly £3 million contract, they've offered West Yorkshire £32,000 with a requirement for match funding, with which to engage 120 primary schools in Leeds, Wakefield, Bradford and Kirklees. There are some quite specific requirements about that. Now, we have consulted with our local authority officers because obviously careers is such an important agenda across the region and at a local level. And there is support. There is a strong case for a focus on careers education at a primary level, as I've already said. But there is a concern about deliverability, really, of what we're being asked to do, and we would be really keen to get the committee's views on that. So I think I'll pause at that point before I go on to the strategic work and the blueprint.
Well, it'll be no surprise that, of course, Calderdale is not thrilled. Especially as at the moment we've got really hard, the rates of neets and exclusions in our schools are rising, I think at the fastest rate. So again, it's hard to explain to people in Calderdale why we should be excluded from it. So that's, but I don't know how much influence you had over that. Obviously, I understand that these funding streams are a nightmare. So I think that was the comment we had, I suppose, from C&K Careers was also just that, well, one, the amount of money was so pitiful as to be an insult, really, even divided amongst fewer authorities. But that they were just concerned that it needed to work in conjunction with everything else that's going on, as usual, so that it fits in with the careers throughout school and doesn't work as a sort of one-off that isn't linked into everything else.
Councillor Dacre, I should have explained why that was the case. So some areas have been designated nationally by the Department for Education as education investment areas, which 4 of our local authority areas have been. So that is absolutely a national decision. That's the limit of my knowledge on that.
Shirley, please.
Well, just to echo, I mean, it's what can you do with that amount of funding, and what are you going to be held accountable to deliver against it? And if the other thing is, if you don't take it, what would happen? But what can you do with it? Can you make an impact? So we should push back.
Thank you. Graham, please.
I was going to say exactly the same thing. £32,000. It's derisory. Actually, it's an insult. I'm insulted by that. That's what can you do with £32,000 in this day and age? My God, I know people that would spend more on a weekend.
Thank you. Tim, please.
Just a general point in terms of the updates and stakeholders that we're engaging with. Doesn't mention parent anywhere in here, and parents can have such a positive and negative impact on those career choices. It was really just a plea to make sure that that sometimes they need educating as well in terms of how rapidly roles and skills are changing for for businesses.
Thank you. Michelle, please. Oh, Joe, please.
Thank you. It was just a point of clarity. It says £32,000 with match funding. Where's the match funding coming from?
Has not been identified.
Are there any more questions or comments? Or I'll ask Michelle to press on with the report, please.
Thanks very much. So from delivery, I wanted to focus on some of the strategic work. So in terms of setting the context for this, I made clear that the extent to which there is local control over the careers system is extremely limited, and yet it is an area that you as a committee are tremendously interested in, as our employers, as we've heard through the LSIP research, we've heard loud and clearly. And of course, all the educational institutions around the table, you know, the quality and inclusivity of kind of the information that people have access to has a direct impact on what you deliver. So one of the things that we're keen to look at is kind of what the regional role should be in the career system. And how that interacts with local delivery. So in local authorities, that there is a lot of work and a lot of ambition to increase ambition and destinations, you know, and connect the neat young people that we were just talking about with local employment opportunities. But the kind of very national system doesn't necessarily allow us to do those things at the moment. So building on a lot of expertise in local authorities, our own Future Ready Skills Commission, which we published a couple of years ago. We're in the early stages of developing an all-age careers blueprint for West Yorkshire, which would be intended not only to drive and influence delivery and continuous improvement, but also to influence government in terms of future planning, particularly with precedents in devolution and trailblazer deals elsewhere in the country. So we have included in the paper a summary of the kind of the career-related asks from both Greater Manchester and West Midlands Combined Authorities trailblazers, which is in page 89 and 90 of the report. So we're in the process at the moment of commissioning an expert organisation to work with the Combined Authority and local authority partners to develop that blueprint. Including really extensive stakeholder consultation, including as a top priority this committee. So what we're asking for here is firstly for you please to engage with that when that organisation is secured. It's really important that this committee feeds in, and of course we're also seeking your endorsement really for this piece of work and future involvement.
Thank you. Are there any questions and comments on item 10? Or Peter, please.
Just a comment, and it's probably more broader than the all-age careers blueprint, which we'd be happy to obviously work with you or have a conversation with you, Michelle, on. And it's in relation to devolution and the trailblazer deals. And a few of us were at Sheffield Hallam University recently, where Andy Burnham again pushed his end back, and I'm quite interested that David Blunkett was speaking after and called it. He said you could call it whatever you want, an e-buy gun back for Yorkshire or something like that. But I think what was quite interesting was Gillian Keegan's response, which is very, robustly against any sense of devolution going that far from Andy Burnham. And I also thought that what was being proposed in Greater Manchester was different in terms of the context of somewhere like West Yorkshire or wider Yorkshire, and particularly our university setup compared to Greater Manchester's is more diverse, and you've got more applied universities in that scope. So I think just something for us to bear in mind what's happening elsewhere with the Trailblazer, the devolution deals, and DFE's response, particularly the Secretary of State, which was very robustly against any sense of Manchester getting further powers when it came to vocational education choices for kids aged 14. So there's something to note, Chair, I think, for us.
Thank you. As people are aware, we're entering negotiations into a Trailblazer devolution. I think we've been negotiating devolution for about 15 years now, so we're keeping somebody in a job somewhere. Colin, please.
Yeah, you'd probably be unsurprised to hear that as far as the colleges are concerned, there's been some progress, but limited and slow in terms of the consistency from schools in providing a range of careers advice, particularly those with sixth forms. This is not a new story, and I'm just interested in how the legislation as it now stands will actually have any influence, or how we can ensure that it does have an influence and there is more consistency on careers advice in secondary phase education. Been a problem for a long time now.
And I think that's something that we'll be seeking to include in this piece of work. But you're right that these are entrenched and long-standing issues. But we need to be ambitious as a region in articulating our vision, and I think that's the starting point, isn't it? To setting out what we want and what we're asking for, and how we would do it differently.
Yeah, to be clear, some schools do it fantastically well, so we know it's possible.
Yes.
Thank you, Colin. Eleanor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, if we have a local vision for skills and employment, but we don't have the authority to work with schools, how on earth are we supposed to achieve that? As a parent of a just post-GCSE child who we talked about green skills and employment, never came up on the list of options at school, so she wouldn't even consider it. It's just impossible. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to? Graham, please.
Just going back, you mentioned about the regional level, whether that's the right point. We in Kirklees don't think that's the right starting point. I don't think the variations across the region are too great. We think actually it should be more local and delivered, but that's just to feed into more of a comment really at this time. But local level, I think, is the right way to deliver this model, personally.
Thank you, Graham. Does anybody else want to come in at this point? Okay, we've got some comments there to take forward. I'm going to turn to the recommendations and see if everybody is happy with those. I take it everybody is, so I'm going to move on to item 11. And Michelle Hunter, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the aim of this paper was to provide you with an outline of the current economic context in relation to our skills support for business offer across the region, and also our future delivery and our current delivery. So the paper just outlines the current economic context for West Yorkshire and future skills interventions that support employers. Just to highlight a few points of interest on the economic context, the data tells us that the number of employers investing in training is limited. We know from the latest skills survey that less than 2/3 of employers are providing training to staff of any kind. We know that key to this is around training behaviour in the context of business needs. And although we know businesses support training, there are significant barriers for businesses to enable them to do that, such as investment of time and funds, and the ability to organise that training. Despite this lack of investment, we know that employers in our region are still facing labour shortages, and they expect that their staff will receive or gain some kind of new skills and knowledge in the year ahead. The main drivers of these expectations are around new technology, equipment, and legislative requirements. You'll see from the report that access to training also differs, and there are a number of factors involved in this. In terms of our current region-wide delivery, we know that West Yorkshire, through our West Yorkshire regional business-facing programmes, this highlights and demonstrates the need for that support to continue to businesses. And you'll see from the figures in the paper that our current Skills for Growth offer has exceeded targets and supported 6,000 businesses to engage with education. And through our levy programme, businesses have pledged £7.4 million worth of levy funding, and Enterprise West Yorkshire has seen 184 sign-ups in the last quarter. So then moving on to future delivery, outlined in the paper, with support of this committee, our climate committee, the Green Jobs Task Force, local authorities and multiple stakeholders across the region. Complementary skills packages have been developed utilising the remaining gain share funding for investment priority 2, which is employment and skills, and decommitted employment and skills budget. In June, the Combined Authority approved funding of £7.5 million to develop complementary skills packages to address methods to develop future skills programmes through the delivery of complementary skills packages that will be delivered between September 23 and March 26. The skills packages have been proposed in the paper, are built on the success of previous programmes and support employers to address market failure where there is currently no provision or provision is coming to an end. The programmes seek to add value and align to regional activity and address gaps where future funding cannot address. The skills programmes being proposed are interdependent and interlinking and have been through extensive consultation to get to this point, and have been thoughtfully designed to ensure that they help to simplify that complex landscape for employers and to align to all those cross-cutting themes such as the ambitions that we have around green skills and climate. So the skills package that's outlined in this paper relates to our support for businesses. So that's workforce development and growth. This currently includes two projects within that offer. One is around the continuation and development of an impartial offer to support employers, including specialist support for digitisation and green skills offers. This will include support with job creation aligned to the mayoral pledge to create 1,000 green jobs, as well as skills funding to enable businesses to digitise or reduce carbon. Also within that programme, there is a mayoral SME graduate pilot. This will be a place-based programme designed to increase the uptake of graduate employment in SMEs where there are specific demands. This has been designed in full consultation with partners, including Yorkshire universities and all the universities in the region, as well as multiple SMEs. So there are lots of ambitious objectives outlined in the paper, and the programmes are aimed and designed to create a solution-focused approach to address the needs and offer flexibility where those needs are in the labour market for both individuals and businesses. We'd be keen to get the thoughts of this committee on the opportunities and the requirement and the ongoing development of that. We've proposed in the paper that we would like to have a workshop with committee members to continue that ongoing consultation and that design. In particular, we would really be keen to engage this committee and gain some advice on the detail, including the routes to engagement for businesses, how we work with stakeholders to design the funding rules and the skills support for business offer, including the skills funding element. The packages are currently in development, so we would, between now and September, we would be really keen to engage with committee members to develop that further. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Are Are there any questions or comments from the committee, please? Tim, please.
Thank you. Michelle, as part of all this excellent stuff on 2.5, it's mentioning soft skills, employability skills, looking at things that are really valuable for business, which has T levels written all over it in terms of why they're developed, how they align with businesses. Are T levels and support for businesses to engage with that, to build their talent pipeline part of, or can they be included as part of this approach? So I think that's really important to, it's a mechanism we've got, that we can then harness to drive that process.
Michelle, please.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Tim. I think as part of this offer, we're really keen to continue with that brokerage and that signpost and that partial support to businesses to enable them to access the multiple programmes that are out there, T levels being one of the pathways available for individuals and businesses. So absolutely.
Thank you. Absolutely supported. I'm very happy involved in any of that.
Thank you, Tim. Martin, please.
Thanks. I just on on that support for employers. This is back to the point I made earlier on, that pointing employees to what's available now may add to the problem rather than take away from the problem. It's just something to be cautious of. So think about what it is advice we're giving them. If it's just this is a list of projects that are currently available, it just adds to the confusion that there is already out there with people trying to understand it rather than having specialist help and guidance on what their actual requirement is. We're in a really strange economy as well at the moment. So there are lots of people. There are lots more businesses investing in skills training. Most of those are larger businesses, and these are growing businesses than used to. They're spending more money on investing in training than on capital expenditure currently, which is a good thing. However, there's at the other end of the scale, there's an awful lot of SMEs and businesses that we'd describe as not all SMEs, but those not so good employers that are doing no training because they believe as soon as they train their staff, they will just go and work somewhere else for more money because we've got this job shortage. And so I just think I need some recognition on how we address those businesses that are not doing the training and give them some security to access this, because a lot of them have done it previously. So how can we get them back into that market and investing in their staff again?
Michelle, please.
Yeah, I think, great points, Martin. I think one of the things, firstly, around the signposting, I think we've got the opportunity to work with businesses within the impartial support that we offer them to get them the right support that they need, but also through this funding. We've got the ability, and we'd be really keen to discuss this with you, Martin, and colleagues. We've got the ability to be able to look at where the need is and actually ensure that pathway is right for the business, and the flexibility through this funding to develop something that really responds to the business needs. So I think that.
Sorry, I'm just.
Yes, please, Martin.
It's not the ability; it's actually the skill set. That skill set is very different to trying to address what a business skill is. A very specific skill set. It's not a general one of doing a diagnostic. That's what I was meaning. So there's people in the colleges that have got that skill set that really addresses someone's needs, but it becomes complicated when it's attached to a product. So you've got a stock room full of training courses you've got to sell, but that doesn't necessarily address the need. All I'm saying is don't become part of that, just pointing to existing products as a system to develop what's right for them. Thanks.
Thank you. Do you need to come back, Michelle?
Yeah, I think that absolutely. We're keen to do that and ensure that this is an impartial service.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, we welcome the opportunity or I do anyway, to be able to attend the workshop. I hope that I'll be available for that. And the only other thing I just wanted to comment on was at 3.16, it talks about The team of advisors for supporting businesses who will be locally based, complementing local authority offers and wider business support. And like all of these things, that's going to be really tricky. So again, we're just anxious that everything is done to try to make sure there's no duplication or gaps that end up as a result of that. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely, and we've been in lots of conversations with local authority partners to discuss how that will work for each individual region to ensure that we're offering that complementary, you know, and aligning to existing programmes. So yeah, absolutely take that on board. Thank you.
Thank you. Jo, please.
Thank you. So within job centres, we're starting now to work with claimants who have some earnings, and we're working with them to encourage them to build their skills and increase their earnings. And we've got some really nice good news stories where post holders have kind of recognised opportunities to do more in the workplace to the benefit of themselves and the employer, and actually taken those kind of suggestions to the employer around how they can do that. So I'd be really happy to kind of bring some of that feedback and also some of the early insight that we're gathering in terms of the conversations that we're having with those individuals, the employees.
Thank you, Jo. Is there anybody else that would like to come in on this item, please? Okay, no, so I'm going to turn to the recommendations, and I take it everyone on the committee is happy to agree those recommendations. That's great, thank you. And at that point, I thank everybody for coming. Note that it's Phil's last meeting. He gave it away earlier on in the meeting, and I'm sure we all wish Phil all the best for the future. And at that point, I shall close the meeting. Thank you, everybody.